Hello,
Hey,
I'm
how's it
Nathan.
going, everyone?
As you've met, we also have Gabe today.
Hello, I'm Gabe. Remember me from about a month ago now?
Yeah,
But
I think
no,
I
I'm
was a little
excited
before
to be
that.
on the call here with Nathan. I don't think Nathan and I have shared any screen time for this. So this should be fun.
So last stream, or maybe the stream before that, Benny asked what we think about when we're designing card systems in the game entirely. And so we wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive on that today. I think we're going to start with how we as players came about playing the different games that we have, meeting as a team, and how that has kind of shaped our thought processes on how we like games to be played. So, Gabe, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, so really, my first card game that I started playing like competitively or put a ton of hours into was, of course, Magic: The Gathering. And that's how I met Colin Cooey, Colin Bevis, and most of the members of the team, and played Magic: The Gathering. I mean, it started playing in 2006, and I would say 2012, 2013 Magic is a lot of that play style with modern is what inspired a lot of some of the decisions that we've made with Luminous. We're talking like modern Magic around like 2012, 2013 era. Qualified for the Pro Tour, Dragon's Maze in 2013, and dabbled in a little bit of Hearthstone, Eternal, um, played Epic, which is how I met Nathan here, and we collaborated for the second Epic Worlds. We met at Epic Worlds 1, and then second Worlds we were on a team and shared a lot of information, and it was fantastic, and definitely some inspiration from a number of those games that are taking place in Luminous now. Nowadays, I mean, I really don't play too much Magic. I do my best just to keep up with what's going on. I'll play an occasional Commander game. But as far as card games go, I play Luminous now. That's really all I do. I try and keep an eye on what else is going on out there in the industry because that's important, and just see what else is going on. But yeah. What about you, Nathan?
So, I, like you, also started mainly in Magic, although I think the first card game that I played was Yu Gi Oh! That changed to Magic. I spent a long stint mostly drafting. I didn't really have the time or ability to travel, so there was no like qualifying for pro tours, going to regionals, etc. Uh,
I didn't know you
dogs want to
played
go out.
a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh. I
Oh, but that like so. Let's say that I started playing Yu Gi Oh at 9, and then I started playing Magic at like 12.
Sure,
So
okay.
it's not like I was hardcore into Yu Gi Oh in my adulthood. It was before I found Magic. I found the smaller rectangles. So I'm a big drafter. I enjoy crafting decks on the fly. So a lot of what I enjoy about game design is how you can actually design your outcome or your experience as you play. Uh, we ended up playing Epic. Obviously, we both went to Worlds 1 and Worlds 2 because we re-qualified. We had I spent a good time playing Pokemon, went to a few states. I went to regionals in a later experience as well. I'm going to another regionals this year. I try to continue playing as many games as possible to try to see what other game companies are doing in this space in a modern day, to see what like design spaces we can use and take like ideas from and meld and like retwist into our own systems, but also just seeing like what people like and don't like. There's some things that have worked really well, some things that have worked not so well, uh, things that are maybe like tracking nightmares versus things that people actually enjoy keeping track of. So one of
Physical space
the
versus digital space
yeah, that too.
in
Like
terms of game design. That's yeah.
I played a lot of Eternal. I qualified for their first world championship, And that is a game where I would love to take way more notes from, but they used the digital space so well because they were digital only that they could get to do things that we can't. I, for a time, looked into how we could make tokens exist in all of our zones, and then realized that was just a physical nightmare of trying to make sure that everyone had enough tokens. And once you run out, then what are you going to do? So that was something we had to drop. But aside from that, in my experience, we had really met and joined minds in Epic, and you'll see a lot of the things that we took from Epic in like the fluid turn structure, the multiple attacks. There was a time period where we actually had you could attack together, but that was also a bit harder on new players trying to realize when that was the correct call. A lot of players coming from the more popular game Magic would assume that you always want to attack together. And then that was actually in 99% of cases the wrong thing to do in that system. And so we cut that rather early on because we don't want players to have these two options and the option to always make the wrong choice is the most popular choice. And it's things like that where we can see what we are playing around with and immediately see like this is not working in our game in our situation, that we just need to drop it, right? We have a lot of systems from Magic because again we've played a lot of Magic as a whole. We did not want the randomization of lands in your deck or any resources in your deck. We don't want it to be a little bit so we don't want it to be about randomly getting cards to see if you can play your cards. We want it about player agency. So with the orbs outside of your deck, you get to sculpt every single turn, and that means that you have way more agency. So we needed to create a system that counteracted that. So unlike other card games, we no longer have the generic resource system. We have only colored essences. So it does actually hit on every single turn what orb you need to play because it affects this turn what you have in your hand right now, but also what you've put in your deck for long term. You can't play a Hive Queen on turn 6 while you also play uh, a triple orange triple green card on turn 6. You have to make that call earlier on, and every single turn in between is going to be shaping if you want to make one call over another.
Yeah, I mean, I think so many of the decisions made early on were just about reducing complexity for Luminous. I know so many phone calls with that I've had with Colin Bevis before it was called Luminous. Um, before all of this is just reducing complexity. That was like always the thing. We just wanted to find what was the actual source of really fun, and what was working, and break it down to just that point, and then remove all the rest. And it's way easier said than done. I mean, that is such a complicated task. At least it has been for me. And like isolating what is making the game fun, removing all the fluff. Um, Not to say that fluff isn't important, but trying to find the actual source of like why does this game work? Why is it fun? Um, and that's the most important thing. Balance after that is a completely different topic. I wouldn't. That was never. That was never the primary like motivator for Luminous at the beginning. It was like, and it's an interesting problem to have. Like you were saying, the resources being outside of the deck. Resources being outside of the deck introduces a new problem where it actually just reduces variance, right? And that's definitely something that we are constantly working on and talking about, in ways to introduce other ways of variance, either through the system or through the cards that we make. Um, but most importantly, I mean, for me, the reason why the resources are sitting outside of the deck is we want everyone to have the opportunity to be able to play the game, to be able to play their cards, and no matter what, at the end of a game, we want you to feel like you were able to play your cards and do your thing, even if you might have lost or it wasn't, they didn't line up well versus your opponent. You at least got to have fun. That's for me. That's the most important. Um, yeah, I
So
mean, for
Colin,
just go ahead.
Colin in chat asked the question: can you give an example of what fluff we removed?
That's a great question. Um, so I mean, you started touching on it, Nathan. On I think we were inspired by parts of Epic system, where you have the choice of attacking with a unit or without a unit, and we just decided for various reasons, and you touched on them, is why even give a player a choice? If it's something that's not gonna impact the game significantly, like why are we giving that choice and adding unnecessary complexity that would also cause a skilled player to win a higher percentage of the time as well, because they're going to make the correct decision more often than not. And so in that example, just removing that, just removing that, and that's for like a number of reasons. It's maybe not even a fun thing. That's just a complexity thing. We're making a new game, and we need to make, like, we're introducing a new system, so it's like hard to introduce really interesting cards and interesting like new mechanics when we have to introduce a brand new system to
Right.
people. And so like removing like all the extra, and that's one example. I'm trying to think of some other ones because
So
there are a lot of them.
I can touch on it a little bit.
Yeah.
We spent a long time in design with like the cube as the original design point. We wanted a draftable environment. We realized that there were too many cards that needed art, and we as a small team couldn't bankroll that as our first project. But one thing that also helped with was actual scope of all the different mechanics and systems that were in the game. By reducing the total card pool, we can focus in on certain key aspects of the game that we would like to highlight at this point in time. And we can still introduce those other points later. So we ended up with what, about like 10 keywords in the final product of the Wanderers. And even then, we cut three of them at the last second. Like, we realized this was a little bit too much. This was only on one or
we
two
had a lot
cards.
we had a
Yeah,
lot
we had
at the
a
beginning.
at the beginning we had a lot of keywords for sure. um One of, I guess, behind the curtain, one of them was the different evasions, right? And
Mm,
thematically, all the different evasions were quite cool. For those obviously who were not there, we decided to do, at the beginning, like a version of high flight and then like hover. So if you're thinking like a bird or a bee, like a lower the ground flight, but then like a dragon would fly way up in the sky where it's very hard to reach. So we had a scaling how easily they could be interacted with or blocks based on what thematically the card was. And the same thing for things that were closer to unblockable versus things that were just um, what's the word, like there was a like a skulk versus a like a roguely unblockable untouchable that you could only block with certain things that had a very clear um, ability to see. And all of that combat related was a lot of fluff, right? It added so much as far as trying to keep track of the game state that didn't really actually solve any problems. It was just very cool thematically. Like, if I wanted to bring abilities from a D&D campaign into the game, like, that's exactly what that was, but it didn't help as much as getting players to actually play the game and enjoy the systems. It was so many more things for them needing to observe and needing to follow.
yeah, I mean,
So
the number of times, like you said it perfectly, like it was cool.
yeah,
Like
it
the
is.
number of times where we made stuff that's like that's cool, but it's like, but how do we like actually implement this in the game, like right now? How, like Yeah, it's hard, and maybe some of those things can happen in the future. I know they can, but
Right,
it's really tough right now from starting from ground zero.
right.
Um,
And it's obviously something we could very easily like go back into. We've done a lot of time designing what we ended up cutting. That doesn't mean it's gone forever. It just means that we're not using it right now. So there are a few like key mechanics, battle skills in the first four factions that we are going to be implementing with this next release that were already in the Wanderers. But when you're talking about, as you said earlier, creating a whole new system, a whole new game for players to learn, you really need to hone in on what you want them to learn, knowing that this is brand new to them. Yes, there are an amount of players who have played other card games like Magic, like Epic, like Eternal, that are similar in scope to what we've created. Those players can probably have an easy time just kind of, okay, so this is the this, that's how that works. Great. They've already played games like that. That's not who this is for. It is for the people who have never played a card game before. It is for the person that when you say let's play cards tonight, think that we're playing poker, and I show them a bunch of people in armor and swords and dragons, and they're like, "This is not what I was imagining." But it is a really fun thing to do, and a lot of people are still playing their first games of Magic for the first time. Correct? Yeah, like
Colin Cooey said, our model allows for more accessibility for new for new players too, which makes that even more important, making things as easy as possible.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
instead of being a TCG, right? We are not a pack model by default. You are picking up our product in one core box. It has the rule book. It has all of the cards you'll need to play in one package. So when we're talking about accessibility, this is something that will go on somebody's shelf in a game store and hopefully eventually a big box store, and they'll be able to play right out of the box. This can work like a board game for those players. They may never see their, Tuesday night Luminous tournament at a local game store, but they will have a full experience ready for them and their partner, their daughter, their son, their mother, etc. Like they'll just have somebody to play with. And it's important for those people to have an easy onboarding experience to a new game. Right.
yeah. So I think we should dive into. Um, I know Benny. I don't know if Benny's here in the chat, but he asked some great questions that I want to get a chance for both of us to touch on like what we're trying to strive for when we're like, what do we want Luminous to look like, and how does that design process look? Do we design it with, okay, we have this structure of Luminous, we want the game to end by this turn, and we design cards around that, or is it the other way around, or is it a mix of both?
So
And
I can definitely
oh, go
start
ahead.
on this one.
Sure.
We have created a system of resources that makes it important that you as a player have agency over your turns, right? Because we have designed that, we don't want the games to end too early. We want to make sure that your plans that you have put into motion don't end before you have fully realized those plans or tried to. So we can use the six turns of basic orbs as a really good model of when we think the game should end, because we can design our 6, 7, and 8 drop cards to be like, okay, this is going to end the game, and then we're going to go to the next one, right? We need to make sure that the players feel like they have been adequately rewarded for going on those strategies of what orbs they put into play, and can actually feel that resonation of, okay, I have done my plan, it has worked. The downside is that once you get into those end game scenarios, we end up with too many resources, too many luminous blooms, where it actually doesn't become an agency or choice matter anymore. It's just you have so many resources that it's just a glop of play whatever you can play whatever you want. But we did need those luminous blooms to make sure that you could still um, bridge the gap after your choices, right? And pivoting as well. But when it comes to that, we don't want the game to end before turn like 4. We want to make sure that you actually have these turns. Obviously, you're going to have some inopportune turns as well. You've created these choices, and maybe you've drawn cards that don't actually fit into your curve exactly how you've laid it out because you made your plan based on the cards in your hand, for example, or made your plan based on the cards that you thought you were going to draw and then didn't. So when it comes to things like that, you will stumble a little bit, and that's kind of intentional. We want every choice to matter, and stumbling actually makes it matter more. And then when
And
we
you
get into the
realize
later
during the
game,
game, we're like,
yeah, yeah,
you
go ahead.
realize during the like, you were talking about plan, and you realize during the game is maybe you started with a bad plan, right, with the deck, and like you only know that once you play a few games and like understand how colors work with each other. Like colors are super important. There's no colorless in this, so like your choices before you even start the game are very important. And then obviously during the game is when you make your meaningful choices on which color orb you put into play, which impacts, if I put a purple into play on turns 1 through 3, I can't cast a chartered expedition on turn 4. I can't. And whether you made that decision before you even sat down to play the game, or you made that decision during the game, but now you have to, that is like part of your plan. And so to me, that is is super interesting. I mean, I love that about Luminous.
Yeah, being able to sequence your plays and get punished for doing so is very rewarding, honestly. I, as a player, enjoy my choices mattering. I would much rather lose because I played the wrong orb on a turn than not drawing an orb at all, right? Or like drawing too many orbs and not getting to play the cards out of my hand because
Hmm.
I only drew the one card that wasn't a resource. And because we've gone with that model, we have to make it a little bit harder. We have to create that friction, like you were talking about earlier. We need to make you make those choices because otherwise the game just becomes kind of free. And if you're not making choices that impact the game, why are you playing it?
Yeah, it becomes a sequencing thing, which is, I mean, in in a lot of ways inspired by epics like priority system, but it's just like
Yeah.
a game of chess. I make a move, you make a move, I make a move, and but that's just like the passing of priority. But like, yeah, the choice that you made on turn 1 or 2, what color orb you put into play, has such a significant impact for the rest of the game, which I think is amazing. Um, and you can try and tailor your deck to, I guess, prevent like any kind of friction, but the friction is always there. It's that's the system. Like we want you to feel a little bit of pain with the colors that you're like. If you can get, you can get lucky. Like this is a card game, right? So like there is variance, and you are playing a heavy orange deck, and you go turn 1 field recruiter, turn 2 toll collectors, turn 3 kind infiltrator. Like you can absolutely do that, and the game will reward you if you happen to draw those cards. But on the same note, like if you're an orange purple deck and you're playing Wander the Stacks and kind infiltrator, that's tough. You can absolutely play those two cards in the same deck, but there is a cost.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's what I like. I mean, nothing is free. Just because your resources set outside the game, sequencing and your choices that you make at all turns of the game have a meaningful impact.
So when we're talking about meaningful impacts, how aside from orbs, right? Like we know in general, we want to have games end in that window between like turn 5 to turn like 8 ish is kind of like the sweet spot of being able to reward you for your play and actually still get to play the game. We don't want the games to end too early or too late. What systems have we put into place that actually kind of tailor ourselves to that?
For one, I think very early on in design, I think we had the opposite problem where games were just dragging on, um, where you could trade resources constant, like, and by resources I mean just like drawing cards. So like I would play a card, and you would play a card that would destroy it, and we would just kind of just be trading back and forth throughout the game, and it would not end. And so we realized really early on that combat needs to be a very big part of the game. Um, we or can't like we need to make units that want to attack, which is why any wave, first wave, second wave, those that mechanic is such an integral part of Luminous, at least right now. Um, like we want players to feel rewarded for attacking, and because we want the game to end. Like we want you to attack. We don't want you to just build a fortress of units and sit behind them and ends up in a stalemate and the game never ends. That's also not fun. Um, there's definitely like strategies where that could be like tailored to, like, there's you can build a fortress of relics, but as far as units go, like we want combat to happen. We don't want any kind of hard combo, at least yet. um, I know that that's still a subject that we're still kind of discussing as a design team, but we have a lot of like soft combos, like a lot of, and really just synergy. A lot of cards that interact very well with each other, that do very powerful things when they're together. But it's not like a hard combo where I win the game. I played these two cards in combination and I just won the game. We don't want that in Luminous right now. I know, at least for me, Luminous is largely inspired by like 2012, 2013 modern Magic. Now, 2012, 2013 modern Magic, there are a lot of things wrong with that format. There was a turn 4 format. We do not want that for Luminous. That's not what we're going for. But when I make that statement, we want that kind of power level. Um, not
We want
not
cards
really
to be
like
impactful.
legacy. Yeah, not legacy Magic, because that's just feels like way more the Wild West. But modern Magic, where, yeah, the cards, every card you play has a very meaningful impact on the game state. Um, Everything is pretty powerful. We don't want, your Splinter Twin or your Birthing Pod for those Magic players that are out there. If you like, those cards were format warping cards that ended up getting banned. We do not want that kind of combo to exist. But yeah, just cards that have a heavy impact, and by forcing players to attack, it just kind of, I think it naturally happened. I know we were trying to make it happen to where we did not want games to end on turn 4, but we also don't want games to go past turn 10. And so a lot of the times games end around like turn 7. I think turn 7, turn 8 is like a nice sweet spot. Um, and I know the team has like varying opinions on exactly when the game should end, but like, yeah, the turn 6 orbs, like you can only have 6 basic orbs in play, is a really good template for like, this is, what we intended,
Yeah.
um,
It's a
for
good
the game
template.
to play out. Yeah.
It's a good template to say like I have fully achieved what my strategy is trying to do because I've gotten my website in play. I've done the lineup. One thing that Colin asked in the chat was, is that why relics can be attacked? And that was actually a system that was based on we don't want a lot of dead cards. And what a lot of games that I've played in the past have done is create these a unit and then non-units. And we don't want cards that will specifically only deal with non-units, like say like a naturalize, right? So many of those cards have to get created over the years to interact with that other style of card, but we don't want to have that be something that like always resides in your sideboard. It doesn't like feel like something you want to put in your main deck. So if we integrate the non-units as something that is interacted with by units, it creates a whole design philosophy around attacking. Just like you said with waves, we incentivize attacking, we incentivize starting combats with things like waves because there's a lot of intrinsic, I don't know what the word is exactly, but like a lot of players when they're first in a game don't want to be offensive. They want to build up their board, as you're saying. They want to like play all their cards and get them to work. But if we align a lot of the abilities behind combat related uh, keywords, then it actually incentivizes you to go into combat to get the full value out of your cards so you can actually see them in their action, right? So if we're focusing on instead of having your natural eyes to get rid of our relic. We still have sudden death and things like it. We want you to be able to make meaningful choices on, okay, am I going to attack your relic? Am I going to attack your favored? And in what order? Do I want to attack your favorite the whole time and then you seem that like, oh, he's applying pressure. I don't want to die outright here. So I can't hide behind my relics. I have to block this. I have to make sure that I don't take too much damage. And then because I put you in that mindset, if I then go and attack your relic afterwards, like I've kind of done a little pump fake and made you block too early. So it allows you more opportunities to weave choices into combat itself.
Yeah, I think the durability on relics, that was such a big like revelation for the team when we saw that, like, hold on, like this is a great idea, because we were having the problem of like either relics, because relics didn't have durability at the very beginning, and we had no idea how to balance relics. And like you said, like a naturalizer, like a disenchant, you need a very specific like card, and that creates like very polarizing game states and games, and that's not fun. We don't want players to feel forced to play a card that's very specific at handling a card. Like we want, yeah, it's just not fun. And that durability, like what ended up happening is just a whole bunch of relics are in play, and it just like clogged up the board. Like if I were to like if I were to see two people playing Luminous when we were early in design, and I go over and I just see all this stuff on the board. Not to say that like there won't be a bunch of stuff on the board in today's Luminous, but I think it was a more complicated without with a lack of durability. Relics could just never die, so they just always stayed on the board. We had a problem with tokens just staying around, and so there were just too many things on the board. And so like looking at it and like dissecting, like I'm trying to envision, like I'm a spectator. I know very little about Luminous, and I'm trying to understand what's going on in the game. It was way more complicated with all these permanents, all these things in on the board. And so the durability, um, one, I mean, it I think solved a ton of our problems in balancing relics, like understanding how to make that card type
And it
one.
also gave us a lot of options as far as design and balance goes. We now have a knob to turn that will, if this is attacked, it does this. If it gains durability, it does this. A really good example of that is Kinetic Harness, where it actually cares how much durability it still has on it if it stays in play for you to get that fifth wave, right? So, sure, you don't really care when it's sitting around, they have 1 or 2 units, but then if because you haven't given enough incentive or enough want to like actually attack the kinetic harness, it can come to bite you in the butt later. So we get to do a lot of cool things with adding on abilities that care about the durability. So if you want to incentivize your players to attack something, we could give it an effect that says like when it dies, the benefit is towards the person that doesn't control the relic, or uh, if it dies, we have some of these things in one of the future factions. Like it actually has a benefit to when it dies to the controller of the relic, so it actually disincentivizes you from wanting to attack it. There are so many like cool things that we get to use, especially with things like unstable vortex or vortex. Words
Um,
are beyond me right now. It it's just a
which
knob that we
card?
get to turn.
It's the red, right?
The green starts at 1 durability. You bolster at the start of each turn and deal damage equal
Unstable
unstable
salvage.
salvage. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of my early designs, and I always think about the like ticking time bomb when it was in playtesting. So like the names of cards are beyond me sometimes. We've been with playtest names for so very long. Uh, so Colin asked, "How do we define fun?" And I think this is a question that everyone is going to have a different answer to, and it's why we've added so many different styles of cards to the game, and even considered adding cards that we personally don't like. I know I have to remind some people that when we're talking about cards, even if we don't find them fun, there is a subsection of players that do. I know one really good example is decking your opponent out. That's something that a very like small subset of players actually really enjoy. So if you're not fully approaching that with like giving them some space, like that's a design choice you have to make. Do we want to have this uh, style of archetype in our deck or in our game, and how much space do we want to give it? There are things like the discard cards were actually made with you in mind, Gabe. Uh, that was literally like your favorite card in playtesting was the uh, one in a check, 1/1 that has arrive in contact to have your opponent discard a card.
Yeah, that card used to, I believe, be unblockable, or it had flight, one or the other. But I thought that that card was absolutely bonkers. I still think the card is very good. Um, but no, yeah, yeah, I like the discard theme. A lot of people like that, but we don't have targeted discard, at least not yet. Um, and I think there's a reason behind that. We want to make sure that you can't just like rip out the fun from your opponent's hand. We want to be careful, as we are a new game, to make sure that Colin Cooey, as he said, yeah, how do y'all define fun? I mean, for me, it's being able to play my cards. That at the most basic level, that is my answer, which is why the resource system exists the way it does. Um, is I want to be able to play my cards. Now, yes, there is some discard that might cause some friction with that, but that's a strategic choice that my opponent made that is going against what I'm doing, which can be fun. Um, but yeah, I mean, I get to play my cards. I made meaningful choices before I sat down to play the game. I put together some cards, and in a way that I know, because I am going to get to 6 resources, to 6 orbs by turn 6, because I know that, like in Magic or other card games, you might not know that you're going to get to 6 on turn 6. So because I get to turn, you know, 6 resources by turn 6, I can plan out my whole strategy. I can't plan that I'm going to draw my 6 drop. Can't plan for that. There's still variance. This is still a card game, but I can come up with a plan to be able to play my cards in a sequence. And there are those like perfect draws, right, where you if you sequence your orbs correctly and you prepared well with deck building, you're able to just go 1 drop into 2 drop, 3 drop, all the way to 6 and beyond, and not lose any momentum and just play card after card, because you're just drawing straight gas from your deck every turn, which feels fantastic. Like, every card draw is live. That is fun. I know that I'm not going to draw the top card in my deck, and it's a resource. It's something that is not going to have an impact on the board. Everything is going to have an impact on the board. That's Yeah.
So when we're talking about everything in your deck is gas, one thing for me as well is just that there's no shuffling, right? There's no
Mhm.
searching, there's no dead air. It's always just I do a thing, you do a thing, I do a thing, you do a thing. We're going to keep on playing, right? I know for me specifically from a design perspective, what's fun is when a card doesn't solve the problem for you and you have to like chain together synergies and figure out how to make the engine yourself. So one thing that we do a lot of times in design is we'll create these perfect cards but then have to like split them up because we don't want the card to solve all the problems on its own. We want you as a player to try to chain them together to splice all of the mechanics to arrive at the engine that you want.
Yeah,
uh,
it's easy to make an engine that just keeps itself running, constantly, and we do that a lot in design. And then, like Nathan said, then we rip the cards apart, and we realize, okay, these 2 lines of text cannot be together on the card because it is just too powerful. That's not like
so
always the case, but yeah,
right.
we don't want self-fulfilling engines.
But then one of the cool things is that we can take that second line of text and put it as a second line of text on a different card
Yeah,
that
yeah, exactly.
will create an interesting card that might go into two different strategies, right? You'll have that first line of text that wants to do something specific towards attacking, but then another one might actually care about defending relics, right? Not a key example there, just words, right? Another thing is we don't have a stack. We have a you play the card, it happens, and then triggered abilities. So that's a very divisive point in card games. I feel like you very early on in design, the designer is like, okay, do I want there to be a chain, a stack, um, an action window where everything happens in response to each other, or am I going to let the players play their cards on their own? And there's even like the farther example of, do I even allow interaction on your turn? Right? There are games like Pokemon and Hearthstone that have no interaction on your opponent's turn. You are literally sitting there waiting. There are some cases where you've played an ability that will interact with them in some way that they can physically see on the board.
The trigger
But
happens, but you're not actually
right,
doing anything on their turn.
right. So there's an amount of wiggle room there between full stack and reaction and counter spells and uh, I want to stop what you're doing mid it happening. But in our game, we definitely don't want to stop you from being able to play your cards. I think there's a lot of dissonance when it comes to learning a new game, and then all of a sudden, you don't get to play the game. We want you to at least be able to play your cards and get the feeling that you're in the game and making meaningful choices instead of your opponent denying everything that you do. And that's a very key point of how our gameplay actually happens. You still have interaction, right? You have taken your action and it, like chess, is given to your opponent. They get to do something on your turn if they have the ability to do so, but they can't stop you. uh,
I know Colin Bevis's um, creator. One of his pillars that Luminous was built on is no counterspell. Like if my opponent plays a card, or if I play a card, my opponent can't um, can't stop it. What we always said early on, and this is the way we'll talk to Magic players that have not played a game without a stack, is it just happens. That's all you need to know. When you play a card, it happens. That's it. There's no in response. It's like the classic giant growth lightning bolt problem, right? It's like I'm going to play a lightning bolt on your unit to try and attempt to kill it, and in response, my opponent goes giant growth to keep it alive. That can't happen. Now, the really interesting thing is it's it it's a concept like I think that was very difficult for me to grasp when I started learning Epic. Is like the it just happens. Is initially I thought it reduces complexity and reduces like meaningful choices, and it's like this game. There's not as many interesting like gameplay, like if you want to get deep into like game theory and like balance, and but it's just different. It's
yeah.
not that it rewards it's a different kind of game. It rewards a different kind of play style. It's not that we're not removing interaction. Interaction is key to Luminous. Like we interaction is super important, but it's just if someone plays a card, they get to do it. But because it's a priority similar to chess, you do something, then I do something. So I have an opportunity to respond. And
Yeah, it
it
creates a lot of different options, like you're saying, right?
yeah,
So in the example of the giant growth, right? In our game, attacking is an action. So when you attack, you're immediately being put into combat, and then because that was your action, your opponent now gets a chance to do an action, whether it be blocking, playing a card, or just passing back to you. It begs that question before you attack. Okay, so I now have first action on my turn. Do I giant growth, or do I like put that kinetic harness in play right now to make my unit bigger before I attack in case they have some way to deal damage to it and remove it? or do I want to attack and then wait and see if they block and then do it?
And
There's
it
also
even
the
goes as
question.
far as like, do I know what color orb I want to put into play? If I have a
Yeah.
unit in play and my opponent has orbs available to potentially play a card, I don't know, but I don't have full information. And when I attack, if I decide to attack with my unit, that might influence based on what my opponent does. Maybe my opponent kills my unit or plays a fast unit to block it. Um, that changes what card I play and maybe what color orb I play after the attack happens. And like it influences the whole turn and the rest of the game because the color orb that you put into play has such a significant impact
Yeah.
on the remainder of the game. So for me, that's super interesting. Sequencing matters so much. Um,
I want to touch on the actual windows in which you get a chance to interact, right? In some other games like Magic, you have these interaction windows at the start of the turn and the end of the turn, where in our game that is entirely like upkeep based. It's literally just you're doing the abilities and then you're given all your ability to do actions. In the case of not being able to play a card at the end of your opponent's turn, you're still in their main phase when you're playing a card when they're going to pass. So if you do play that card and the card goes back to them, they can still go and attack. And that changes the dynamic of being an aggressor and defender. Is Do you want to just pass without attacking, see what their opponent is going to do with all of those resources they left up, and risk not getting your entire turn because they didn't get theirs because they held up all the resources on your turn? And then you get rewarded if they play the card and you have to attack because their shields are down, so to speak. But then you in that case have risked. Okay, am I willing to trade off my entire turn potentially, or do I want to make a smaller set of actions to get some value out of my turn before I make this choice?
it's why dash is so much more powerful and luminous than haste in Magic. Like they are virtually the same mechanic, but they behave very differently based on the system that they're in. Dash is very strong in Luminous because of everything that Nathan just said.
Yeah, with
Um,
like things like Vinehorn Stag, you being able to weave certain attacks and them not even see this unit that has a third or a fourth wave that you're preparing for, that now you can literally play it before your fourth attack and get that card draw, right?
I think a lot of like so like we're talking about the system and like the complexity of like what we've done and like all the decisions that can be made, but I do want to note that at the surface level, the system is designed this way to be simple. We have removed all the phases. There is no main phase. There is no second main phase. There is no, oh, you missed the combat step. You don't get to attack anymore this turn. Like you always have a chance. You have the freedom to structure your turn however you want. The only time where the turn is like structured is the beginning of your turn, right? You prepare all your orbs, you do a start of your turn effects, and then you draw a card, and then you have the freedom to do whatever you want. And then obviously, whenever you enter into combat, that is the only other structure in the turn where there are like certain rules that have to be followed. But that yeah, the freedom to do whatever you want to not have to. It's not like, oh, I have to play the orb at my beginning of my turn. You can make that choice at the very end of your turn if you want, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what your opponent might do, or how they'll interact with you, and that's going to influence your choices.
So, what did we want specifically the opponent to be able to do on your turn with that interaction? Like, we have made a point to make sure that every single time you pass priority, or every time that you take an action, it passes priority, that your opponent has that opportunity to do something. How big of a discussion and decision point within design is it for us to be able to say, like, okay, what can the opponent do during my turn?
Yeah, I mean, having that interaction was very important from the very beginning, which is why, why fast is a thing. That we didn't want games to play out like solitaire. We knew we weren't trying to make a system like Hearthstone where I play out my turn and then you play out your turn, and like there's limited interaction there. It's just a different game. Um, but we wanted the game style to behave similarly to Magic in that you always have the opportunity to do something, because if we're removing the stack, that is in a way a piece of interaction in the game that we are removing. And the reason behind it is to make the game more simple, even though it introduces other areas of complexity. um,
Yeah. So that removes counter spells. That removes like protection effects. It removes the pumping and response. So in that case, what on our opponent's turn do we want to do? And a lot of times that is we want to interact with combat. We want to be able to increase our board presence when they go in to attack us. We also want to be able to remove their attackers if we have the option, like the walk back or the sudden death. What other things that could have fast are we okay with putting on the opponent's turn?
you're asking just what other cards? I mean,
Yeah, like
yeah, I mean
like
just
so
removing things,
we
playing units, and it's a lot of it is just like largely combat based. Um, so ways that interact with combat, putting a unit into play that can block another unit is really one of the most common ones. Just playing a kind of like a removal spell, um, and the unit having fast, it doesn't necessarily have to block. It's not necessarily like this was crafted in mind to be defensive, to block something, but like Raya thrives on you playing fast cards on your opponent's
right.
turn. And so we want to reward you for playing fast cards. Now, whether you're playing defensively or not, I've seen Raya decks, I've seen very aggressive Raya decks. Doesn't mean you have to play a defensive way, but yeah, just it's similar to like, okay, in Magic, at the end of your turn, I'm going to play a dude, and then I'm going to try and attack with this dude when it's my turn. Like something as simple as that. Um, yeah.
How do we want, like, as a little bit of a spinning the conversation, how do we want the games to end specifically? Like you mentioned earlier, and I mentioned it as well, what turns we generally want the games to end. How are we okay with the games ending? What kind of game states or effects are we okay with designing towards that manner? And how do we want to turn the tides, as it were?
Yeah, it's tricky making the so for me, like turn 7 through 9 is like turn 7 through 8, 7 through 9, around there. And that would be a successful game where both players were able to play most of their cards. You're probably going to end up still with like a couple cards in your hands, which is something that's really interesting with Luminous. Is it's kind of difficult to just run out of stuff unless you built your deck in like a specific manner. Which if you did, like hats off to you. Like that's amazing. If you're able to just play all your things and overwhelm your opponent. Um, but yeah, it makes it interesting in the design process on how do we make a 6 drop or a 7 drop. Um, like these need to be very impactful because we do want the game to end. So once we reach that stage of the game, like these cards need to be very powerful. And in a way, it can be kind of polarizing because you have committed to playing one card. All you're doing is one card, and your opponent knows you're playing just one card, and that comes at a big cost in
And
probably
it's
the colors that you played, and like you're you know it costs all your resources. And so it better do something really strong. It better try and end the game, because if it's not, then your opponent's going to end the game.
It's also not just the fact that it is a 7, 8, 9, etc. drop. It is the fact that we have no generic costs. This is something that you've been telegraphing and working towards your entire game. The best example is Jungle Dragon in The Wanderers, where you have to have that cost. If you played any green at any point during your turns, you need to wait an extra turn to play a Luminous Bloom. And that is also affecting how you are ending the game, is how like early you're going to be able to try to end it. So a lot of times we do have to try to balance scaling the power level of these cards. Yes, we want them to be able to end the game. How handily we want them to end the game is often the biggest question. Sometimes we've had to, again, in these faction designs, create this very powerful card that has to get scaled back because we don't want a single card to win the game on its own immediately, even if it is the on average the turn that we want it to happen. We are very cognizant of future designs that might involve being able to create luminous blooms more often, more consistently, as we just create more cards in the card pool, or do interesting things like cheating a card out from your hand or from your discard pile. Just doing interesting combinations of things to get around actual costs. We're not actively trying to ignore our entire systems, but we're understanding that those kind of cards and effects are very cool. So we're not totally counting out their design in the future. And it really does affect how we can design these game ending effects. And as Gabe said, it's just the one card that you're playing. A lot of our future design as well has been trying to tailor that like Hive Queen style of experience where you're getting to play multiple cards in a turn, but only if you've set up the orbs in a certain way that allows you to do that. So we've got a lot of new cards coming out that have like 2 costs and then 2 checks, or 3 and 3, or uh, 1 and 4, for example. We didn't that didn't end up in the current iteration, but I'm sure it's going to end up in a future card sometime. There's a lot of cool things that we can do with combination of costs, and it allows us to create these game states where you are playing multiple cards in the later stages uh, that you couldn't early. We want to be able to create these stronger cards that have low costs that allow you to play more than one card in a turn on these later stages of the game so that you can sequence these powerful uh, combinations of cards. And it's hard to really fine tune and balance what that means for winning the game and ending it, right?
Yeah, I think we right now in playtesting initially we try and make, especially with like the cards that cost a lot, we try and make them powerful and maybe overpowered initially because we want to push um, we just want to push the card, like, because if you're going to commit 6 7 8 orbs, um, you need to be doing something powerful, and so we want to we want our playtesters, we want us when we're playtesting to want to play the cards, and the only way to do that is to kind of just make an overpowered version of it and just see where the line is, because we don't know where the line is yet, and
Yeah.
we'd rather push the line and it see play, and then it's easier for us to tone it down rather than it just not
Yeah.
have the impact that we want it to have.
And
So
we've had
yeah,
the full spectrum on that too. But I think that's about what we have time for today. It's been almost the full hour. So thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure. If you want, please join the Discord. A link will be in the video description when this gets posted as a video. And also, if you want to be a playtester and playtest these new factions before they come out, we are still accepting playtester applications. You can check us out in the Discord for all the links on how to do that. And we'll see you next time.
thanks everyone.